The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. The Agile Coaching Network is brought to you by Agile Alliance. If you don't know who the Agile Alliance is, please go up to agilealliance.org and learn a little bit more about this member-supported organization. They make it possible for this podcast to happen. I'm here at the Agile Testing Days conference here in Potsdam, Germany, and I'm talking with a group of thought leaders here, and I wanted to get their impressions on several different things. Anything from why have a separate conference that's just focused on the techniques and what you need to know from being a tester in an Agile environment, to just general questions about how test fits into the larger picture and how we build a highly valuable product for our customers. To kick things off, if we can just go through a round of introductions.
Hi, my name is Damon Sinadinos, born, raised, live in Columbus, Ohio, and I am a tester. By career, I've been testing for 25 years at various different companies in different contexts. 5 years ago, I started speaking and training, mostly on soft skills, which is a term that most people get the gist of what I teach, core skills, power skills, people skills, whatever you'd like to call them, fundamental concepts. And now I do speaking and training around the world at various conferences and corporations.
My name is Paul Holland. I am a senior director at Metadata Solutions of Test Engineering. I'm one of 5 instructors of the Rapid Software Testing course, and I like to say that I help companies make their testing more efficient and effective while reducing waste.
My name's Eddie Bruin. I've been a tester for over 10 years, but nowadays I've shifted more to be an Agile coach, where I tend to say the same things as I always did in testing, but now it seems fresh and new when people listen to me. Other than that, I like to use games in work, so I'm also a serious game facilitator, and I recently started the label The Serious Gamers to go to companies and help people facilitate serious games at work.
Hi, my name is Hype Schout. I come from the Netherlands. Like Paul, I'm one of 5 rapid software test instructors. I work for a company called The Agile Testers. As Eddie already said, I'm more focusing on coaching teams on quality. And the reason I chose for The Agile Testers is that the background in testing, and I love testing. And I recognize what Eddie says. Now I can call out on quality related topics and the whole team will listen to me, instead of when I was a tester, I had to really struggle. So I think I would say I'm an Agile quality coach. That's what I do.
I'm Tom Roden. I work in a very small consultancy called Nuri with 3 other people, one here. I guess about 20 odd years, I guess I've been in testing. Last 10 or so years, again, more in the general coaching sphere, but I guess I always gravitate towards quality and testing within coaching. I guess that's just something that, because I'm passionate about it, I will do. Mainly around things like specification by example, behavior-driven development, and a bit into sort of the more context-driven or exploratory side of testing, and instructor of the Agile Testing Fellowship with Lisa and Janet.
I'm David Evans. I'm also a partner in Nuri Consulting. I've been in IT for 30 years, and I've been exclusively in Agile for the last 15 years. Currently the Agile coach for the UN World Food Programme.
Christine Corbus. I'm in IT for 20 years, 10 years software testing, 10 years doing everything else. Now, since 2 years, a little bit more, I work as a trainer at the company Trending, based here in Germany. I give trainings and consultancy around topics in software testing, requirements engineering, and I gave a talk this conference on testing technique.
Great. And thank you for spending the time to record this podcast with me today. To get us started, I was wondering, we have lots of conferences that are around the planet that focus on Agile and Agile development. And my question is, what makes this one special? Why have just a conference that's just focused on test?
I would say that because the competency of testing, it's a different mindset to that of the development, and having a conference where we can focus on trying to enrich as much as possible the abilities and the competency of being a tester. It is the rationale, I believe, for this particular conference. It lets us have a place where you're surrounded by testers and other people. There's Scrum Masters, there are developers here, but it's predominantly testers. It gives us a sense of community, and it allows us to hone our skills that we need to be effective.
Other than that, it's not only that you're a tester, as you said, but it's the act of testing. So that means there are many aspects to it. What brings us together is the topic.
So in my understanding, testing is a reality check, and every conference should have testing dimension. It doesn't matter, it's developer conference, agile conference. I think the title is a little bit misunderstood, that it's like agile testing days. But for me, that's simply agile conference with a reality check, very, very ongoing, as an ongoing thing.
I'll suggest that at a more abstract level, why have a testing conference as opposed to testers going to other more general conferences? I think teams often produce products or services, and it doesn't matter if it's creating software or building cars or creating food at a restaurant. They're often done by individuals, and those individuals make up teams, and they each have their own particular specialty or things that they're good at and other things they're not so good at. And sometimes it makes sense to go to team events, and everyone that builds the car or creates the meal or creates the software goes and learns together. But sometimes I think it makes sense to go and have smaller sub-events where you can focus on your particular specialty. So the people that build the car, each one has a different skill set. Maybe they break off and go to their own smaller groups. And the same thing, each person in the kitchen has a specialty in the kitchen, and they can go and learn together and refine those skills specifically. Same thing with all the different people that are involved with making software, designing it, building it, testing it. Sometimes it makes sense to do it together and learn together, but sometimes it makes sense to break off and refine those skills specifically.
Yeah, when this started, 11 years ago or so, I think because Agile was going pretty mainstream then, there was a lot of ambiguity around what testers were going to do and a lot of change in testing. And I thought it was very, very relevant then for bringing testers up to date with lots of things that were changing in their world. As about 3 or 4 years later, I started to think, well, maybe it's too narrow a focus. But actually now, I think the specialism thing, I think actually it's probably more relevant that it's nice to have a theme that is definitely just aimed at testing as an activity and the specialism of testing, and not just becoming too general and everything being sort of a bunch of everything, I guess. So actually, I'm starting to think it probably has more relevance going forward in making sure we keep testing as a specialism, whether it be testers, developers, whoever attends. Maybe it needs a broader audience to attend it, but I think testing as a specialist theme is still a very good thing going forward.
Yeah, what I see at this conference, it's also, I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different people here that don't identify themselves as testers, developers, coaches, and I think they need to know about how we think about testing, and testing is a quality-related topic. It becomes more and more integrated in the whole team. So to focus our thinking on that, I think we need events like this to advance the craft.
Also, just to add on, I think that pendulums are interesting things. If they swing too far in either direction, things get tricky and sticky. And I think that if you swing it too far in one direction and say everyone does everything, then no one does any one thing good or any 2 or 3 things good, and everything's diluted. And I think it weakens the output. If you swing the pendulum too far in the other direction and say you only do this and that person only does that, then there's very little collaboration between people, and you don't quite understand what the others do. So I think there has to be a healthy balance, make sure the pendulum's somewhere in the middle, so you do have some understanding of what the rest of the team does, so you can work well with them. At the same time, you don't lose sight that people have strengths, and you can rely on those strengths. So some people do some things better than others, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I'm going to extend what Damien just said.
I'm glad extend and not disagree.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Damien. One of the biggest elements in my mind of what differentiates a tester from a developer, and I'm not saying you can't do both, but it's often a different mindset. A developer
writes code and has the responsibility to show that it works. And their mindset is, I've written this code, I need to make sure it works. While a tester's mindset should be, I need to show how it might not work and how it might fail in ways that are important to our customers. So it's a different way of approaching your code. And if you don't have a dedicated tester or someone who has the tester specialty, a lot of times you'll miss a lot of the elements that a tester would pick up because of the creativity required to do the silly things that customers do either on purpose or by mistake.
I will a little bit disagree with the Tom.
Oh.
Yeah,
Tom,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, Tom.
That's fine. You can disagree.
Yeah. Thank you for permission to disagree.
So do I.
Thank you. I'm
For what it's worth.
very pleased. Now, I like what you said 11 years ago when the conference started. The world was like this. And now, fast forward 11 years later. So how I experience that by giving trainings and seeing people who struggle with that daily. I think we need a conference where all parties come together. So that's why I said before that testing is not so important. That's the reality check aspect. We more need conferences. We have a lot of conferences where we specialize on something, on development, on testing, on agile, on coaches, and so on and so on. A lot of unconferences, but mostly people don't go to conferences of other domain. So I think, and I would like to see that Agile Testing Days becomes the place where everyone is invited. Because we see it again and again, and it's written in manifesto, work with others, collaborate, and they still don't do it. So it's not about manifesto. It's not what the software development method says. It's about people. And people tend to do the same all over again, even if they are trained not to do that.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the community?
And by community, you mean?
Or even just this local community. I mean, you mentioned that, this is a place where we're addressing some of the complexities of what we're trying to go deal with in development. And I was just wondering what you consider to be those big challenges that these types of events can actually help.
Okay, I will keep going with complexity. I think that's one very real thing that people currently are not dealing well with complexity.
Okay.
And they're not dealing with complexity well as developers or as a testers or as managers or as coaches. And then somebody comes and says, now you have to care about others as well. So you're not only a developer, but a tester and manager at the same time. Now you need to lead, and the person is not feeling comfortable to lead, not even for 5 minutes. That's really a problem.
Yes.
You cannot force that. And that's why I like as well that we talk in Agile Testing Days so much about safe environment and psychological safety and so on and so on. How to build it, that people come up and share when they are not okay with something, whatever. Like I like what Damien introduced in his keynote about cam-shaped professionals. In trainings, what I give people think, oh my God, I don't have tea, or my tea is not enough, or the top bar is short, and my manager is and my agile coach is pushing me to start to develop. I don't want. Because they are using language, but I think does not solve the problems, and they are not free to choose the language in which to solve the problems.
I'm going to disagree with Christine.
Please do.
everything you said about the complexity and the people who need to work together, I fully agree. Yeah. But I hope Agile Testing Days stays Agile Testing Days forever, because as Paul said earlier, we need these special tester skills to be fostered and to be put out there. Let me give you an example. At another conference, Alexandra Slotterbeck brought her developer friend, Zeb, and he said something marvelous afterwards. He said, first, it was a tester conference as well. He said, I felt very welcome. And second, I finally got an insight on what testers do all day. And I got to value the things they did. And I didn't see that before. And I think that's a very powerful thing. And yes, we could do that because I like to give trainings to teams to train them in testing, and basically in training, testers show up. And I think that's not the way forward. But at a conference, I think that's a group of experts going really deep on testing topics. I think we really need this community to keep talking about testing. So I wish that we have more real testing topics on the program and still do all the other things because they're as important. So I think we slightly disagree only on what the community should do.
I guess, yeah. I guess that was more my point. So I'm a member of the Agile Testing Fellowship. I absolutely believe in whole team testing. And I'd like to see more people who want to learn deep testing skills come to places like this. But yeah, it's more the point that I'd like to see really furthering the art of testing, or whatever you'd like to call it, not just for testers, but just for anyone who wants to really go deep in testing and see more of that kind of thing. And I say that as someone who doesn't do anywhere near as much as I used to. But yeah, it was more that rather than certainly not the exclusion of we should just have a testing thing for testers. It was more that was where I was coming from, I guess. So the pendulum comments.
Further extending all of this conversation. Very, very generally, conferences are full of content providers and content consumers. People that create the content, people that consume it. Now there's fuzzy lines, and many people that show up at a conference as an attendee often inspire those that create the content as well. But very generally, it's people that bring topics and ideas and people that receive them. That said, I brought up an important point that Alex brought her friend that was a developer. So while the content providers and creators, I think, should continue to provide testing and testing-specific, testing-related topics to keep this a testing conference, I don't think that we should exclude non-testers from attending. Exactly. So I just wanted to call that out explicitly, that this is an open conference for anyone to attend. And that was part of the keynote, that this conference offers a lot of content that's applicable. It's more than that. It's more than just a testing conference. It's a content for testing, but it's not just for testers. It's for all sorts of people that are testers and also that are not, that want to learn more about testing.
Plus one to that, yeah. Otherwise, pendulum has swung too far.
Yes.
It was in the conversation, but not very explicit, so I'd like to make it explicit, that this is a testing conference in the Agile realm where we're in. So that means that what sets this conference apart from other testing conferences is that there are many Agile topics. Not the here's the Agile manifesto again, or here are the principles, or here's framework X, Y, or Z. But the more modern Agile way. So coaching, how does team dynamics work? How do you use games to explain what testing is about and what Agile is about?
And switching gears a little bit, how can we improve the customer experience? How can these events help to go support for us to hone our craft better in order to deliver higher customer value?
I like to see real testing related topics like test strategy and not only the let's do a bug hunt or let's do exploratory testing, but I like to see those. So let's make that happen. We're part of the speaker community. Let's do those talks.
Really cool that everyone for the next year would submit something about actual testing techniques.
Crazy
topic.
talk. It will be the actual testing days. The Agile actually testing days.
I challenge you, Paul.
ATD, actually testing days.
I love metaphors, and imagine a car conference. People say, well, what topics do you have at a car conference? And some people might say, I go because of the tracks on the history of cars. And others might say, well, I go because of I build them and I'm interested in those that talk about design and building cars. And somebody else, I'm a driver. I like to go to those tracks where they talk about driving. And other people say, there's not enough tracks about specific things like timing belts and spark plugs. And somebody says, I've been here 3 years and I haven't seen one about the fuel economy of cars. And there's infinite topics. And somebody says, where do we have any topics about the joy of cars, just the love of cars generally? There's so many things when you think about car conference that could be high level, low level, abstract, emotional, technical, and take the word car out and insert the word testing into that. Same thing.
Kind of on the lines, have you seen a shift in the behaviors of people who are test professionals? I noticed when I was back at a Fortune 100 company, as soon as we started to adopt Agile, in the very beginning, it was awkward for testers to know exactly the fit of how their methods fit into the system. Then what I noticed was a switch. We started bringing in coaches to coach us on things like Scrum and other things, but I noticed the tester started to become a coach, and they were coaching people on different methods, ways of having a more critical mind when looking at even just developing your own code, or even contributing further upstream when we're in the early opportunity phase to understand what it would take to actually build this full system that we were looking at. Have you guys seen that shift as well within your areas?
So before I became a trainer, I used to be a tester. And as I think everyone with 10 years of experience, I started to give more and more workshops for my colleagues and explaining things. And I was thinking I'm the quality coach. I was pretty proud because that was at that time a new thing. And I'm riding the wave. Since I've worked as a trainer, I thought, oh my God, how naive I was. I was not really quality coach. That was not structured thing, what I did. And I think I feel like I didn't really understand the problems what my colleagues were facing. I just was riding my test horse and saying, this is the cool thing, you should do it.
I've already said this earlier. Thank you. It took me a long time to get those exact pauses in there. No, I'm trying to I'm going to repeat something that I said in the earlier, which is the mindset of a tester has to be different. And if I've written code, even though I consider myself a tester, I do write code. I have a computer science degree. I can't test my own code because any oversight that I had while I was writing the code, I'm going to have the same oversight when I test the code. I'm not going to suddenly go, now I'm a tester. I'm going to think of all the things I missed. So I can do a better job of testing my own code if I'm coached on things, but having the testers questioning earlier before code is written, having when the requirements or user stories or whatever is being created, having the ability to ask questions to reduce the amount of issues that could potentially be overlooked, and you end up with better quality code coming out the other end. Having the developers write a really good unit test framework showing that their code works and future-proofing it so that if there's a change in the future, their unit test will hopefully pick it up. But then still having a creative, inventive tester to be able to challenge the code in ways that you can't even imagine in the future. You have tens of thousands of users or more. They will do things that no one ever expected. And it's a very big challenge for the entire team to say, instead of just saying no user would do that, to get the code into a state that it doesn't matter if a user does that, because the users are going to do things that you're not anticipating.
This is something new for you?
Not nothing at all new. My point is, by having the entire team, so in the very first place that I worked at where I went Agile, we had a team in Belgium and they went fully Agile in quotes, where everyone was a team member. The testers had to code, the coders had to test. In the branch that we had in Canada, we recognized that the testers had a different skill set, and we left the testers testing. They were writing automation. They were doing exploratory testing, while the team in Belgium went to just team members where anybody could take any story. And I asked the person from Belgium why they did that, and he said, well, that's how everyone has to be. That's the capital A Agile way of doing it. Everyone's just a team member. And I said, well, what about hardware? We have hardware people who are doing hardware, and then software, and then testers. And he said, well, no, there's a limit. And so I was curious why he thought there was a limit between a hardware designer and a software designer and a tester, and no difference between a software developer and a tester. And so I think everyone should have a specialty, even though everyone should be able to potentially take any story or help out with any story. They might not be able to take it on their own, but there are limits, to quote the guy, but using it in reverse. There are limits, and the limits in my mind fall into each role.
So one of the things that we had when we were doing CPU design is we were actually able to, after 4.5 years of doing an Agile adoption, we finally got a full vertical slice of functionality from the top of the OS all the way through to the hardware and emulate that hardware block. So we got to the point where we could say, when can we ship this? We used to say, well, when the project was done, but after we've invested a lot of new tooling within the organization, we were able then to say that if you like the current features that are done, we could ship this in 8 weeks. And that's how long it took to fabricate the semiconductor from that. So what new tools did you guys come up with when you started going down the Agile road? I'm curious.
That's interesting because I wanted to react on the word tools. I think what you mean with tools, if I listen closely to your project, and I'm asking you a question back, are you talking about tools? Or are you talking about tools with a different mindset and a different skill set and a different process?
And yes,
but I hear people do this a lot.
He's my straight guy.
But why I call you out on it is not to correct you, but this is what I see happening with managers a lot. They say, we need a different tool. I very recently was at a company that wanted me to coach one of their teams. And two of the people were at this conference. And at this conference, I heard the team didn't choose me to help them now because they want to focus on automating their tests. And that will solve their problem. And I don't think it will. But this company chose that the team is in the power to choose their coach. And they now chose to go for the tool and the process that comes along with it. And I think it won't solve their problem, but they're going to find out that, and they'll learn from that. So that's okay. That's very agile, and I'm okay with it. But why do we need more tools? We need different thinking.
Again, I always go metaphorically, abstractly, because that's my focus. But I think sometimes people don't fully understand the problems, and instead they offer solutions to symptoms. And that's why after 3, 5, 7 years, weeks, months, whatever time frame, the problem hasn't gone away because it was never addressed in the first place.
And you said you saw people's behavior change. So testers did different things. They applied their methods and techniques in the Agile context. Sadly, I've also seen that they still do the same thing. So context around them changed slightly. We labeled project managers to Scrum Masters. I'm exaggerating it a bit, but they're still doing the same thing. They just wait for requirements, then verify the requirements with whatever code is thrown to them and throw it back over the fence, even though they're co-located now and they can speak with each other because they're within each other's reach. But that doesn't mean that anything actually changed that much. So that's just, I've also seen the other way around, and I still see that.
Do you consider that to be agile though?
No,
right.
I don't. But that doesn't mean that it's not taking place. It's happening.
No, I see a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely true.
I think the fact that a requirement that's now well anchored with a good acceptance criteria, and to be able to say that is a testable requirement, I think was a key add, that by having, I have a love-hate relationship with user stories, but that component alone solidified a little bit of something that wasn't in the mindset of the developer, it wasn't in the mindset of others, that this particular requirement is now something I can look at and go, I know what tests I need to write in order to verify this. I think that changed my life.
So what Eddie said and what Huub said, and what I said before that I was doing bad job. So to sum up how I thought is, I completely agree to Eddie that people at the end don't change. We don't want to change. We do so that we kind of change, but you need to experience something really bad. And I think we noticed and experienced that this week in the conference, that you really change something. So, and that I meant that I did a bad job as a quality coach, that we were talking to use your examples about UI. We changed UI, but the backend was still the same. So the developers, they are pretty focused on tools. They don't want to think about elements which were involved behind the tools, because they can work with tools. They are very good at that. They need to learn what the tool does and then apply it. So that they are extremely good at. The rest, they don't really want to understand. So that's why I think this conference is so important. And I have requirements engineering background as well. So in requirements engineering, we pay so much energy into finding what is the real problem. I don't see that happening in Agile projects I was involved or in consulting and training from Agile teams. They accept what the product owner is saying and then go with that. So the requirement engineering part is pretty much missing. That's how I experienced that, and I wanted to say something.
So I used to be a systems architect, and I would write really great, impressive specs and requirement documents. Complete everything.
100%.
And, and I'm not sure, your own experience in this space, but what I found in the old days, way back when in the dawn of time, I would put Easter eggs throughout my specs. And I had my grandmother's cookie recipe on page 326. I would put all sorts of other different things inside of there so that somebody read this, please. Find that defect that I injected into it.
Did anybody ever find your defect?
Yes. And who do you think it was?
You.
No. Actually, it was
testers.
It was the intern. The intern came in and just wanted to impress because he wanted a full-time job at the company. And he actually walked into the review with the plate of cookies baked, and he sets them on the table and he looks at me and I look at him and everyone else is confused. And I go, this is a great recipe, isn't it? And he goes, yeah, it is. I eat 5, anyway. So
good story. I like that story.
Yeah, just on the tooling front. So to channel Weinberg, every problem's a people's problem. I guess I've seen an Agile consultancy I've worked with take 3 months to build a perfect continuous delivery pipeline that said Hello World, and the customer didn't want Hello World as an application, and fired the consultancy because they went too far that way. And test 300 tests that all spun up a Docker container on their own and had a 50% fail rate. So tools obviously can be used very badly.
I want to bring up a quote that Ade did in his keynote where he quoted Peter Drucker, and it was something that Christine was saying that reminded me of it, which is, any innovation in a corporation will stimulate the corporate immune system to create antibodies that destroy it. And unfortunately, I have far more experience in going into companies, having a lot of people nod their heads and say yes, and a vast number of people want to take a change. And after I leave and I check in a couple of months later, the antibodies of the "this is how we've always done it" corporation think come back, or there's a bit of pressure put on them, so they throw away the new methods and they go back to the old methods. And it's actually comes back to a question that you asked much earlier: are we seeing a change? I am seeing a slight change. I'm seeing a lot of waterfall with Agile terms. I'm seeing a lot of fixed content with fixed deadlines and bad quality. And I would love to say that I've seen a trend for better quality over the last few years, but I've seen a trend of let's automate everything and eliminate good testing. And I have a feeling we're heading as a society down a road of horrible software for the next few years until companies pull their heads out of their rears and realize that they need actual good testing and not just the the automation.
Yeah, for me, that starts with understanding what complexity is and dealing with it. I have the idea that the way the change is not happening is because we don't want to deal with complexity, because it's hard to deal with complexity, and we don't like hard. We like to have it easy.
So at the end, it's again, as what we talked before, it's about behavior. So we are people, we are animals of resisting change. So in nature, everything else adapts much, much faster than the human being. And we say, and that's why I'm sometimes a little bit sensitive, that learning here, learning there. No, we are not learning if we are sitting and listening. We are learning if we are applying. And again, what you said, Paul, is if everything is running fine, applying, it's not a big deal. But the question is, what do we do when things happen? And then we tend to fall back in our old patterns. So the learning and behavior, we should put much, way more energy into that.
There's a unicorn as the mascot of this particular event. I mean, one of the things I have seen great Agile teams, and I've been fortunate enough to go see them. And the response that I get from those teams are not that they've reached a destination. They've really embraced dimming circle of saying that you ask them, did you get your Agile transformation done? And they'll always notoriously just reply, well, this is a journey. Paul, to your point, I was over at Stanford University, and Edgar Schein was one of my idols. And, I described what we were doing in our company. And his first response was, and I thought he was going to tear apart my content about what we were doing. And he just looked up and he says, how do you guys survive? And I think the survival of people with the right mindset to go off and implement these things and continue to try to implement these things. A lot of the people that I meet at events like this or the big Agile conference or others are all people looking for some way of being able to penetrate that bureaucracy, the antibody, fight off the antibodies and other things. And I'm just curious about your guys' techniques, because I know you probably come here to recharge and to hear the good stories and the good war stories over the year. I mean, what is your key takeaway from this week?
That wasn't the question I thought you were going with.
I had an answer to my expected question, and then you threw in what's your key takeaway? Go ahead. Sorry, Christine.
So this is new to me. I used to come here to recharge, but not this time. This time it kind of drawn my battery even more. But my takeaway is that I'm not alone in any sense. I'm not alone who's facing what I'm currently facing and not talking about with others. And I know it because people talked about that. So I think this is a good thing to take with me, that to keep going. It gives me power to keep going. I don't have any energy. I would like to have vacation next week, just to process that through. But to know that I'm not alone, it gives me energy to keep going.
So the question I was almost going to answer from the sort of what the function of these conferences is, I guess learning, was it Deming said learning is not mandatory, neither survival, or something along those lines. So I guess the thing that I'm seeing, and I guess where the takeaway or the pulse, the heartbeat, I get, is mainly from a lot of the new talks actually, is where because that's where, and David said this in the talk he gave, that's where a lot of us speakers will, because we're not necessarily always at the coal face as much as we might once have been. That kind of where you get what's actually been practiced today, the real experience, the real data, the real insights as to what's going on for a lot of new teams and new people. So I guess I see the trend of that over time becoming a lot of the problems that we used to have in lack of collaboration, in testers as a secondary, or the black sheep of the family, the distant cousin, are changing a bit. And I see gradually a trend. Maybe it's not a key takeaway to one massive punch, but I see a lot of problems have been solved, and the trend is definitely upwards in terms of where testers seem to fit within teams and some of the problems they're solving. So it's a gradual up, but I haven't seen any spike, and I don't know whether we're looking for that spike. So I guess rather than a key takeaway, I do see a lot of problems that I used to face and I used to hear from new talks still existing have started to become solved. So I guess that's that's encouraging. And I guess that's the responsibility of all of us and all of the people who come here and speak to try and to keep driving that forward, I guess.
So I think a conference, and in particular a conference like this one, highlights for me the different forces at play that will allow you to succeed or fail at a genuine, sticky, agile adoption or transformation. I think there's the natural human resistance to change that Christine refers to. What I see in a conference like this is you see the exceptional people. You see the people who have shrugged off that resistance to change are in fact usually the opposite. They're the ones who are really enthusiastic. They're the ones who probably had to fight to get permission to come here because they're the ones who are pushing for change in their organization. And they're kind of up against to me, the biggest example of Paul's lovely phrase of the organizational antibodies. It's the inertia of the HR system, the inertia of structure, the inertia of reward systems, the inertia of this is the way things are done here. And perhaps referring back to an earlier question you said of, are we seeing the shift left? Are we seeing testers become coaches for teams and so forth? I do see good examples of that. I do see examples of teams in general overcoming the bottlenecks that they see within their teams. But the success or otherwise of that really depends on how strong is the force of that organizational inertia that says, sorry, you can't do that. Your architects can't become more like developers. Your testers can't become more like coaches. Your developers can't become more like product owners because our structural hierarchy inherently prevents that. So I think the problem is that, that's why I feel, to pick up a much earlier point, that any conference that's role-based in any way, in intent or in practice, is doomed. We do need to be much more holistic about who we see our target audience is for a conference. I think for the most part, this conference has that aspiration. I sometimes wonder whether it's achieving that year on year. I think we are perhaps becoming a little more like a circle of friends that's tightening a little rather than expanding.
I would like to mention the takeaways I had over the years here at the Agile Testing Days, not just this week, because you can learn on many levels here. First time I was here, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, I saw Goiko and David present new ways to look at quality, new ways to test or to explore, for instance, with specification by example. And it really got on to me. So I really wanted to implement that. And I did. I applied, like Christine said. And what I found is that some people that are enthusiastic and they go with it are supportive of that, with the energy that I bring and that I got from these people. So there was a big training program set up on specification by example. I was teaching all these people with my knowledge, which was little at the time, but good enough. And what I saw is that of those teams, like 20 teams that I trained, like 2 or 3 picked up. And that's when I realized it's not about knowledge. Knowledge is just one thing. And that's what we tend to focus on at conferences, or at least I focused on at conferences. And then I found out it's about willingness, about sense of urgency, and yes, structure can help you there. So what I've discovered later on at the Agile Testing is that there were other talks addressing these topics, like how can you bring change? Last year I gave a keynote on how to bring change. And I concur with Christine that we need to address that topic as well, but both are necessary. So I see first timers coming here really dig into the new content. They heard about specification by example, about test automation, really energetic. They go away, come back, one illusion gained. And then they also see that there's something about change that they need to address, but then they can use that knowledge again once you know how change works. But that's the hardest part. It's not the knowledge or bringing the new technique in. So there are 2 main takeaways. It's not only the knowledge, yes, it's important, but it's also knowing how to address people, how to get not them to change, but change the system around them so that they will change and then use that knowledge. So there are several takeaways that I get from this conference.
Just one thing that Eddie mentioned there, that it's and I'm not disagreeing with you, disappointingly. Probably my biggest single takeaway is the feeling of being able to inspire some of the new faces. I did the dice game. I facilitated the dice game with someone yesterday who wanted to learn how to facilitate the dice game better. So we were sitting beside each other, going in parallel. And of the people who did the dice game, I don't think I did the dice game at the last 2 conferences here. So it's been a while since I've run the dice game. And there was a lot of energy around it. There was, I don't know, probably 15 people at our table, and they were very energetic and I had some feedback from multiple people saying that they had learned a lot about testing, alternating between focusing and defocusing, all from playing games. And just that energy and the feedback from not even an official part of the conference, although games night is, but just that one thing, I guess it gives me hope that people can get enthusiastic still about some of the details and being inspired by a game, and hopefully they can take that energy back and pass it on to the rest of their team.
I want to extend a little bit on what David said about family coming together. We need to remember that we are speakers, and the world and the conference, how we see, it's not the real conference. Like, we have, I think, more than 100 speakers, and if you have been to several speaker dinners, then majority and some of attendees, and then you have the feeling that this is just support group coming together. I had the feeling last year, and then at the end of the conference, I met some new people who were for the first time, and I really was surprised what they shared and how they experienced the conference. So this year, what I tried to do to get in contact as much as possible with new people, with rookies, and to get their perception, how they experience it, what they see, what is important for them. And I was very surprised how much they take on. So almost everyone could say 2-3 things what they immediately want to apply. So if it doesn't have such a value or impact on you and me, it definitely has on new people. And especially, I heard a lot of good. I wanted to participate, but I didn't manage. And in session, Get Your Ideas Moving, about walking outside and talking with people.
I was just very quickly going to say on that, that's a lovely idea, getting people who visit the conference their ideas about what they're going to take home. I was wondering whether, you could put a massive wall at the front and say, what are you going to do next after this conference, and collect that and use that as data. It'd be fantastic.
What I would like to say about that, I was here, I think it was the second or the third year I was here, and Matt Heuser was giving the closing keynote, and he said, whatever you do, if you go home, don't write your boss an email saying this is what we need to change, because your boss will just see an email. So instead, what he said is, list just 5 points of the things you thought were pretty good, but the best 2 things. Don't write them in the email, but simply try and apply them. So that clanged to me, and I did what Matt told me, and I used that quote in my keynote, which was about the change. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Paul facilitating the dice game, because this is, I think, a perfect example of how I brought change. I was giving a tutorial on serious games. There was a guy very enthusiastic, and he wanted to host the dice game because he was introduced to it last year at Agile Games Night here. And that's, for me, a cue that I need to step away. Clearly, there's a follower. He leads me, or I lead him. He follows me, and I step away and say, hey, you want to do this? You're willing to do this? Awesome. Go spread the word. And then Paul came in. I asked Paul, could you help him become a leader in facilitating the dice game? And there it went. So that's how we change. And I think that was a perfect example. Thank you, Paul.
Sorry, this is exactly the point about how I try to do my trainings. And I'm a mother of 3 children, and this is how I try to raise my children, that I'm not the leader all the time, but to step back and give them power to lead. It takes a lot until you are at that mindset, but I like how here keynote speakers that we see, first time keynote speakers, and especially I was excited about Marianne and her powerful message, which was very quietly channeled, but so inspiring. And I think it's just time maybe for change of generation of speakers. Like, we did our job, and now we are stepping back and giving space others to lead.
Would you be the proud parents of this?
Yes, we are proud parents.
What is wrong with you people?
What are we going to do next? What happens to us?
So just to wrap up the conversation, the one thing that I'm always surprised of is that why do people seek permission to go improve themselves? And I think that when people go back to work and they go, please, manager, may I improve my job or improve the way that I do my work? I think they're actually setting themselves up to not own and be empowered to be able to do their work. So we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank you all for the conversation. That was incredibly wonderful. My next trip, I will be in Stockholm, Sweden on December 13th, 14th, and 15th. It is not a public event, but as all places where I'm traveling to different locations, if somebody wants to get together in a pub or have a nice get together, let's go ahead and go do that. After that, February comes up Agility Today in India. No, I think the call for papers closed on that, but why don't you guys please go take a look at that, because I hear that is going to be a great event. I will be there, and a number of Agile Alliance board members will also be there too. So it's a great time to strike up some good conversations. I think they're trying to get me to do another business agility lab there. We'll see how that all comes together. With that, I hope you guys have a really good month. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.